Hello and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making to try to figure out what keeps us stuck and, more importantly, how do we get unstuck. I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. With me today is Wangari Kamau. Wangari is the founder and principal consultant of Soma Global Consulting. Wangari is a curator of global leadership and wellness retreats. Her passion for working on wellness awareness began when she found the courage to raise her voice against unequal pay and experience the intense backlash that came along with doing that. The second event that was traumatic for her was the end of her almost 30-year marriage, which left her standing at the precipice of her 50s, tasked with redefining her identity beyond what had always anchored her in the past. Both of those experiences forced Wangari to piece together a new, stronger, and more resilient version of herself. She now guides others to do the same. Wangari, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate you having me on your podcast and look forward to us having a productive discussion that can help others to make this journey that I have made. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to be
Oh, it is my pleasure. And I love your story. So if you want to start with a
here.
little bit of your backstory, because I think it's very unique and can teach a lot of people a lot of things about resilience.
Well, I could say that maybe the first resilient story starts when you come to the United States as an immigrant and then you start working here and just adapting from your home culture. And I ended up working in an organization where I was fully dependent on my visa, on my employer. And at the same time, this is where my initial battle started when I challenged a pay equity issue. And we'll dig a bit into that later. And then I left the organization and I started my own company doing leadership development consulting and always looking at the holistic person because people in leadership tend to go, go, go. And the wellness aspect is sometimes left out. So just bringing those together into leadership development programs.
That is so beautiful and so important because I think you're 100% right. Especially high achieving and successful professionals, executive business owners, they're so focused on getting the job done, the job being everything other than taking care of themselves, that they don't take care of themselves. And so the fact that you were able to bring some awareness of that and some practices to counteract that into the workplace is really, really needed, I think.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And being solopreneurs and working on our own too, we shouldn't forget also the people who are working on their own, women running their own businesses, men running their own businesses. Everybody needs some support to be reminded that your self-care is critical to the success of what you do in life.
Right. Because if you go down and you are the whole business or the linchpin of the business, that means your entire operation is going to suffer or fall if you suffer or fall. But
Exactly.
But your fight with equal pay, your work with leadership, that wasn't the end of your story. I want to talk about a little bit, if you don't mind sharing, about your divorce, because your situation was more complicated than most. You had a divorce that involved international issues, which is always complicating. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Yes, and divorce is always difficult, no matter where you are at in life. And now I know I'm in a group called the Gray Divorce, being somebody over 50. And my situation was, as you mentioned, further complicated by the fact that my now ex-spouse, lived in a different country. And the rules there are very different from the rules here in the United States. So just one anecdote I can pull from there is when in the United States you're getting divorced within the national borders of the US, you end up sending something by regular post, and there's a little green label that the court wants to see.
Yeah,
In my situation, yes.
that's what is that? That's the when you send
Register,
something by certified mail, you get a little
yes,
green card back. That's
yes,
what you're referring to.
the certified card mail. You've been in this space.
Oh yeah.
And what happened in my situation, the courts did not understand that this could not be done. In that, when they asked for the certified mail, the green label, and my lawyer had to explain, oh, this cannot be done because it's an international divorce, and we sent everything actually by DHL. And of course, to get these responses back and forth takes time. And when the courts came back, they said, oh, you were not authorized to do that. You need to get permission to do that. So we had to go back and rewrite and ask for permission to do that, and then do the same thing we had done earlier to send the documentation.
Wow.
So the cost also is, of course, astronomical. The timeline it takes, and usually the judges here understand that also when it comes to the portion of divorce settlement, they cannot rule on anything that's outside the United States jurisdiction or the borders.
Wow.
So that, of course, sometimes may mean that you're exiting a marriage where you were somebody who was a partner, but you're only going to get the assets that are based in the country where you currently reside. And for me, that was in the United States, and where the judge had jurisdiction, because this is where I filed for divorce.
Wow.
Yes. So the back and forth, the trauma of all that, and coming out of the tail end of this fight about pay equity, I was emotionally drained, traumatized, tired. It was one of those situations, Karen, if I had not had the inner strength to pull myself and say, no, I really, really need to find a therapist who can work with me. And I'm lucky enough, after a few interviews here and there, I did find somebody who could work with me. However, just working with a therapist was not enough, because you also have to figure out how are you going to go on making sure you maintain that part of taking care of yourself, of your mind, of your body and spirit. So I found myself setting up a template. How was I going to take care of my mind? How was I going to take care of my body? How was I going to take care of my spirit? Because if I did not put those templates in place, I was heading for, I guess, what people might call a mental breakdown or a nervous breakdown, but it was not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
So by just making sure I had those milestones or that template in place, that was really great for me. And I have worked and talked to other women who've been on similar journeys and told them it's not about whether you can even afford the lawyer or whether you can afford to do this legal aspect of it. You really have to put in place that template to take care of your mind, your body, and your spirit.
So when you say template, I'm curious, what do you mean by that?
Well, for some people, I say when you're like for your mind, you have to see what, depending on your personality, is going to work best for you. And that means you're helping your mind sort of compartmentalize, move away from this huge thing you're going through. And you can do this by learning a new dance, learning how to play a new musical instrument, learning how to swim. It doesn't matter, just totally learning something new that is unrelated to all this stuff that is going on. And when it comes to your body, that means you're working to move your body. I know some people push back when it comes to exercise. Not everybody loves exercising and going to the gym, but just being active, whether it's going to be gardening, even just doing your own housework. You save the money and you have no one to complain to about those corners that nobody got to. It's all up to you. Wash your car. just something that gets your body moving, your mobility. Then we come to the spirit. This can be prayer. It can be meditation. I am big on meditation. That's my mode. That's what I use. And even when I work with people one-on-one or with groups, I always use meditation techniques to work through different things, whether it's life transitions or something somebody's going through. So meditation, and also looking after your spirit in a way that you have your tribe. You have your go-to. Who is your community? Who holds you there when you need to say, as Brene Brown says, when you need to have your ugly cry?
Yeah.
And who can you pick up the phone and call at 3 a.m.? That is what I mean when I say community. Somebody who's really got your back.
Yeah.
So that also really helps you take care of your spirit. And taking care of your spirit, I think, also involves finding a way to draw from the fact that you are a human person on this earth. How can you also give back? How can you help others?
Wow, that's huge. I mean, because most people, when they're going through some major life trauma, could be a divorce, could be like in your case, the fight over equal pay, could be a job transition, could be a lot of, a lot of different things. But when you're in the midst of the trauma yourself, most people don't think about giving back. I mean, what would you recommend to help people make that mindset shift? What would you say if they said, I don't have the bandwidth to think about anything other than the mess I'm in.
Because when you then make that mess or that challenge the center and the focal point of your life, then that is where you start going down a slippery slope, because you have allowed it to consume you. And the
Okay.
moment you allow it to consume you, then it becomes, as the French say, your raison d'être, that your very reason for existing. It's what defines you. Think of it like it becomes your brand.
Mm-hmm.
And you're letting it, and letting that person or the situation really eat you up and become the reason that you're here in this world, which is not true.
That is so profound. I really hope people hear that and listen to it. But, so what would you recommend when somebody is all consumed? Because divorce can be all consuming. Let's just put that out there. I usually tell people it's like having a second full-time job, for sure. And if you let that take all of your focus, you do go down that slippery slope. How do you find something else to focus on?
I think it's baby steps. For example, first of all, I would say the most important two people you should have in your corner if you're going to go through this. You need a good lawyer and you need a good therapist. Better still, if you can find a divorce coach who's a lawyer, like Karen, then you have a perfect match. I kept saying to Karen, I wish I had known you before I went through what I went through, because the emotional side tends to drive everything.
100% right.
Yes.
100%. Because the emotions fuel the fight. The fight makes the legal bills go crazy. And when you are focused on the fight, what you focus on expands. You get more fight. You just do. So that's why I think that your experience is so profound. So I'm hearing that you had that good lawyer, you had the good therapist, you got through your divorce. But then what? How did you start to put back together the pieces, not of your old life, because that was gone, but how did you create a new life that you're very happy about?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, just having that template, balancing my mind, my body, and spirit, and saying, what did I do to get this harmony? Like, what did I do how did I think, okay, I'm going to work on my mind, baby steps. And next, I'm going to start putting in place those markers on how I'm going to work on my body. And I'm going to put in place those markers, how I'm going to work on my spirit. It's an individual journey, yes, but working through it got me to a point where I realized I can help other people who are coming after me save a lot of time by doing this. And I came up with a methodology that I call a personal mirror approach, because for me, a personal mirror approach is saying to that person, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I matter and I am important, so I need to take care of me. And how am I going to take care of my mind? So I sit with that person, look at where they are in life and because not everybody is going to be able to sit down and meditate for 45 minutes or half an hour. So what can we slot in that will help this person do something based on the time they have and based on where their mindset is today?
So how do you do that? Because I know, let's talk about meditation. A
Yes.
lot of people use meditation as a tool to get through their divorce or any other trauma or even just daily life. But so many people won't use it because they think, oh, that means I have to sit on a mountaintop for an hour. Or if I don't do it for X amount of time, it's not enough. What would you say to that? How much time do you need to meditate?
I would say that it's about, there's a subset of meditation called mindfulness. And that means you can get up in the morning and maybe your routine is you always have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And as you're making that cup of coffee or tea, be truly present.
How do
I'm,
you do that?
I'm putting the water in the coffee maker, 2 ounces. You're repeating the steps of what you're doing as you are doing it.
So, like, you have that conversation in your own
In
head
your
while you're
own
doing
head,
it. Okay.
as you're repeating to yourself as you go through those steps. And sometimes when you're going through something and then you're making coffee and you're worried about that situation, and then you go and you stir and then you think, did I put sugar in this? Or even you set the coffee maker and you don't put the water in. It happens when you're
I'm laughing because it does happen. I like been there, done that. How many times do people lose their keys? Can't remember where you put your phone. And it was in you put it down somewhere, but you're not paying attention.
exactly. So you're slowly, and when you're doing this, you're just breathing slowly. You breathe in and you breathe out as slowly as you can. So you're saying 2 spoons of sugar, 1, 2. You're really present in that moment and breathing in and breathing out slowly. Breathing out should be actually slower than the rhythm of breathing in. And when you do that, that time it takes you to do that will help you immensely.
So what I'm hearing you say is even if you don't have the time
Yes.
to meditate, or you think you can't meditate because so many people think they're doing it wrong, I can't do this, I can't focus, whatever, that even just taking the time to be mindful when you're doing a routine task, that's a start.
Yes, and it's a great start, especially when people are feeling so overwhelmed by this big thing they're going through, this divorce or this rebranding when they're retiring and moving to their next act, or this caregiving role of looking after an aging parent or even a spouse who is ill. Because that's when actually you need to take care of yourself. But the pushback is, I don't have the time.
Exactly. Exactly.
And sometimes I say to people, I don't have a lot of money, Wangari. What can I do? Even if you can go to a public library and sit in the quiet room and borrow a book or borrow a periodical and just sit in there for half an hour and read, that's good enough. So this is what I was saying, Karen, when I said I sit with people and look at their family situation or their particular situation. And then when I use the personalized mirror approach, I come up with a strategy for them that
Okay.
works for them. And some people live in areas where it's not safe to be outside. So I say, just put on your walking shoes and stand on the spot and listen to your podcast. And when your podcast ends, you're done. Your workout is over. You're just walking on the spot. So really meeting people and helping them see that when it comes to mind, body, and spirit, we can find a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
But how do you find a way? Because what I find so fascinating about you and your story, and it's like you said, it's like so many other people, the gray divorce. When you're divorcing and you're over 50, right? And you've been married, you've been in a long-term marriage, it's your whole identity that's shattered. How did you go about rebuilding your sense of self, your identity, your personal, your faith in yourself?
It was not an easy journey. And the one thing I can say is I truly focused on asking myself this question: what do I want? And when you ask yourself that question, you're not going to come up with a response immediately. Sometimes you can journal about it for even a week, even if you're out hiking and you're thinking, what do I want? Who do I want to be for the next half of my life? And I felt for me, it came down to a value system in that I want to be somebody who is truly honest with self. And I don't know if you know Don Ruiz Miguel. He talks about the importance of speaking truth to self.
The four agreements.
Yes, exactly. So speaking truth to self is critical for me, and I have followed that ethos. And that means also that I don't put myself in situations where there's negative energy. And I always feel that creating, also, I worked to create community. And one of the people who I created community with just went through an illness. She had breast cancer, and the whole group just rallied, and it was a true show of what community can do when you take the time to cultivate that community and you all trust each other, and that 3 a.m. phone call. So I created that, or I was part of that. I worked really hard to make sure I put that in place. And the other thing I also made sure to do is just to truly own what I do in life. And it's about having a growth mindset. It's about saying, oh, supposing we do this podcast and it doesn't work out. I'm not going to go in my corner and think, oh, I think Karen actually didn't like me. That's why she didn't do the podcast. I could come back to you and say, oh, do you want to give me some feedback on maybe why we weren't able to do the podcast? And you could say, Wangari, maybe there was a tech issue. It's more about having a growth mindset, is asking also, what else could be going on here?
Yes. We all, you make such a good point, because we all take in bits of information and then we make a story from it in our own head.
Yes.
And we believe the story that we make up. And what we don't realize is that that story might not be true.
Very, very true. Yeah, that is so true. And I also want to own everything. I want to be responsible, because I think in my marriage, I handed over a lot of responsibility and control to my spouse. So making sure that I stand in that and that I own my space. I stand in my truth, in my courage, my power, and just to be somebody who writes their own story rather than giving someone else the pen.
I love that. I just love that. And you certainly are, in my humble opinion, an icon of courage for all of the things that you've done and you've stood up for. And that you now help other people is just, it's a beautiful thing. And I want to get into that now because I don't want to get to, to the end of our time together and not have delved into what are these retreats that you do? Who are they for? How do they work? What will people become by participating in one of these retreats?
Well, the retreats, my one takeaway that I would like people to have is one, I want them to come back from the retreat feeling rejuvenated. I want them to come back. I also want them to come back from the retreat feeling that they see a way forward, whichever way they craft that way forward for them. And the retreats are mainly, of course, it's a group, and I primarily focus on women over 50, but it doesn't mean that's all that I focus on for the cohort groups. And I do two types of retreats. There's what I call a mini retreat, which I do here in the United States, in the area where I live, that's in the Washington, D.C. area on the East Coast. And on the mini retreats, I call them a restorative day. It's just one day where we also have what I call a taste of Kenya, which is my country of origin. So I immerse people in Kenyan culture, the food. We do some of the Kenyan music. We do some of the empowering things that help women in that age group. And we also use, of course, I love meditation techniques to work through different things. And for women over 50 right now, my focus is just looking at things to do with transitions and using meditation as a tool. So that's a mini retreat. And when it's the bigger retreat, which is wrapped in with a safari, so it's
Wow.
a meditation safari retreat. And these are usually 10 days. And again, I take people back to Kenya and we do the Masai Mara. We spend some time in Nairobi just doing gathering circles, knowledge sharing with people who are part of the cohort group. And then we spend time in the Mount Kenya area, and then we come back. And because I really believe also immersing yourself in a different culture, traveling really opens up your mind. And it
Yes.
also helps you know sometimes that you're not alone, that there are other people who have also gone through this experience. Maybe they're in a different culture, but they have gone through this experience too. And as human beings, we are more alike than we're different. So that immersive cultural piece is something I always like because I came from a working background of international development. And I believe that cultural intelligence and also cultural awareness is really important.
That sounds amazing. But I have a question for you. Say I'm a woman over 50, which
Yeah.
I am, and I'm going through a
See?
divorce, which I'm not. But let's say, when would be a good time for someone to consider going on this kind of retreat to heal, to rebuild themselves? Should they wait till their divorce is over? Should they do it in the middle? When is a good time to go?
I think in the middle or probably at the end, it would work better because that's the time you really feel, oh my goodness, now what?
Exactly. That I'm so glad that you said this. I can't begin to tell you the number of people, when I was actively practicing law, I take them to court. It's their final hearing. And I have to tell you, it is the most anticlimactic thing you're ever going to experience. You get married, there's a big wedding, there's guests, there's a big, big celebration. You go to divorce court, you're standing in front of the judge for maybe 10 minutes. They ask a bunch of routine questions. You're like, yes, no, yes, no. There's a whole there may be a whole courtroom of strangers behind you, or there may be nobody. And the judge says, okay, you're divorced, have a nice life. And people walk out and they go, is that it? Is it done? Is this all because it seems like a nothing event.
Exactly. And that's where that mind, body, spirit part comes in. Because some people then, I think I've seen people who've gone to the other extreme and done things that you're like, okay, okay. I mean, it's like they need to live life in the fast lane or something like that, because it's like these, or some people feel they want to hurt the person who was their ex-spouse, and they then invest in all that negative energy. So the now what portion, that personalized mirror approach is a critical piece of getting to your next act, because also living your life with all this anger or resentment in you is so counterproductive. And they've even done a lot of study which show that then inflammation sets in, then you start getting ill, then it becomes a ripple effect of things that don't end well.
Yeah, I often tell my clients, you want divorce to be a bump in the road of your life, not
Exactly.
the defining moment of your life.
Thank you.
You know?
Exactly. Yes.
And
It's a life event. And I know when you're going through it, you think it will last forever, but you also can't let it define your life and define who you are.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and I'm sure we both know people who have clung to the divorce as that defining moment, and they're bitter and they're angry. And, I've talked to people who are just like spitting mad at their ex, and I'll say to them, well, how long ago were you divorced? And they'll say 10 years. And I think, oh my goodness, you've been living like this for 10 years?
Yes, those are the people I just mean. I say, shake it off, shake it off, shake it
I know. And those are also the people who would look at you and say, that's not that easy.
off. Well, nothing in life worth having is ever easy. You do have to put in the work if you want to get to the other side and live a healthy life and age with mobility, with all your faculties within you. And having relationships is not just also about sexual relationships. It's also about relationships where you have that community, where you have those people, where you can you can be in those and be fulfilled. It doesn't mean because you now do not have a spouse that quote unquote you are nothing or you are nobody. That's where really that therapist portion comes in. But the other portion, that personal mirror approach, is that's your ongoing care of how you are going to take care of yourself from now on, because you're somebody else now. It's
You
like you've
make,
hit reset.
yep, you make a really good point. This is not a just, one and done. This is a lifelong practice, and that you're always in the process of, if you can adopt that growth mindset of continually learning, of becoming the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and that's all okay.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it may sound difficult when you're going through it or when you've come to the end of it, and you, like you said, that anticlimactic moment when the judge says, okay, fine, next. And you're like, oh, is that it? But you will get through it. It won't last forever. And life will go on.
100%. And, even the people that I've spoken with who have had really long, drawn out, ugly divorces, they end sometime. At some point, you
Yes.
will be divorced. And the question is, how do you want to create your life afterwards? And it sounds like you really help people do that in a fulfilling and beautiful way.
Yes, and I would love to work, because there's nobody like somebody who's walked that journey before you. to tell you, to hold your hand and also tell you, this is how I think based on where you are. This is the small step. This is where you can start.
Right. Because people get overwhelmed. They think there's
That
too much. I can't do it. I can't do it. And it's like my father used to say, you can't eat the whole elephant in one bite.
exactly. You cannot.
So you just take little baby steps, and it's the tortoise and the hare story. You keep taking those baby steps, you will get to the end.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that with that, there is no better place to bring an end to our conversation. But before I do that, Wangari, can you tell people where they can find you and where they can find the information about your retreat? I mean, we'll link to it all in the show notes, but just give people, if they're listening, where can they go to find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Wangari Kamau, Wangari Kamau. And if you type GPHR, that way you can find me, because there are very many Wangari Kamaus on LinkedIn. It's a very common name. And you can find me also on Instagram. My handle is allwell50+. And I also, my wellness business is under Tembea, Tembeya, Wellness Retreats. And Tembea is a Swahili word that means to travel, to walk about. So it's a play on my roots.
I
Thank
love
you.
that. Wangari, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your journey, and all of your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Karen. And I look forward to seeing the podcast.
And for those of you who are hearing or the podcast or seeing the video, if you like this, if you enjoyed today's episode, please, it will mean more to me than you'll ever know. Give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and I look forward to talking with you again next time.